Hi, my my name is Maxim Guseynov. My Instagram handle, Goose Say Enough, comes from my last name, and that moniker also comes from a conviction that wherever necessary and possible, it's good to say enough on matters that are relevant. And for me, in the context that I'm in right now, most of what's relevant is the family dynamic, how I relate to my wife, my children, and the household as a whole. And so for maybe the past decade plus, I've written quite a bit about the subject of marriage and family life, and raising up children, disciplining children, and along the way the mistakes that we've made, the tweaks to our approach, and lessons and whatever else. And so if you're new here especially, I hope to be clear on this part, I'm not some teacher or master of this subject that has never made quite foolish errors along the way. But what I have done, and I think this is maybe, if I do have a gift and a perspective that I think is relevant to this subject, it's that I just don't have any shame in admitting where I have failed or where I need to grow. And over time, that's resonated with others because we've all, one way or another, realized along the way as parents that, there's actually quite a few mistakes that we're prone to make, sins that become either habitual or patterns that if you peel back enough, layers of that onion, you really can start to dissect and realize how you ended up where you're at. And so that's my hope with this first video, and maybe others to come, is that I just realized, most people don't come to Instagram to read long form content on any of these subjects. Very few people do that, and I'm thankful for those that do. But for most of us, we're just here to either scroll or, watch a speech or two from that painter from a long time ago, or whatever else pops up in our feed. And so my hope is that at least one or two more of you will be caught through this medium as opposed to long written form. I'll still do that, but this is my first attempt. So the subject I wanted to cover is avoiding unnecessary arguments, and that would apply at a relational level with your spouse, but specifically I want to touch on children and how often we could be prone to doing that with our children. So stick around if either one of those applies to you. But even if you're not married and you don't have children, if you interact with really any superiors, or they interact with you in the workplace, at school, wherever else, this same kind of pattern creeps up, and it would be at least worthwhile to think through the nuances of how we end up arguing where otherwise we could have just gone through that task. And so specifically what I want to hit on is avoiding instructions through the form of questions. And I'll explain what that is in a little bit, but again, avoiding conflict or arguments by giving instructions in the form of questions. So oftentimes the way this creeps up, especially if you have older children who are able to reason, able to articulate, able to hold a conversation, so I don't know, maybe 7 years and up, this is where this happens quite often, where a child just doesn't do what they were told to do, or they don't do it completely. This is probably where it's more relevant, where they don't carry out a task all the way through. And so I've observed this quite often. My wife would walk in, she would see something as unfinished, and she would say, "Hey, why isn't this done?" Or, "What happened here? Help me understand why this task isn't completed." And even though in her mind, what she wants ultimately, if you were to distill it all down, is just, "Hey, complete this task. All right, this is what I want to be done." But once you open up that door in the form of questions and you say, "Well, why wasn't this done?" then the answer becomes the opportunity to argue over those details, and you really forget the end goal here. So why wasn't this cleaned up? "Oh, well, I got distracted." "Well, why did you get distracted again? Haven't we covered this 1,000 times?" "Well, yeah, but this thing popped into my mind." "Yeah, but I told you this is what I needed, and it was urgent, and you just didn't follow through." And before you know it, a couple of minutes later, you could be recapping your entire life. "I carried you in my stomach. I birthed you. I nursed you. I do all these things for you. Like, can you please just get one thing done?" Right? And it becomes this loaded, heavy, potentially heavy, emotional back and forth, where all the while your end goal of getting this task cleaned up is nowhere closer to being done. And of course, sometimes there's a time and a place to do this, but 99 times out of 100, it's probably avoidable and unnecessary. In fact, you could just bookmark what you wanted to cover, and then if you have a family meeting or whatever else, you can ask your husband to cover these things with the kids to make sure that they follow through on some of these tasks. And it doesn't just happen with our children. I mean, when I just got married, I stumbled into this without any guidance. You know, my wife, probably like most women, is quite capable of, in her mind, thinking she's giving out instructions, when really she's just making observations in question-based form. So, like, hey, honey, do you feel a little bit cold in here? Even if my answer is no, right? Even if I'm fine and I'm not cold, what she's really saying is, I'm cold. Can you get me a blanket? And that might be a silly example, but it comes up all the time. And over time, husbands realize, like, all right, if there are observations that are being made, there's something behind that. And you either learn to communicate better, or you just realize how to connect the dots or follow the breadcrumbs. Most of the time, it's cute, completely harmless, but over and over, if this pattern comes back, this form of communication comes back, especially with children, then you just open the door towards a back and forth. And if they give you an answer that's not sufficient, well, that becomes its own separate issue that you're dealing with. And you just keep opening up these doors of potential conflict when really all you wanted was, like in that case, a blanket or things to be cleaned up or whatever else. In the workplace, it happens all the time. I mean, really in any setting, the clearer you can communicate what the end goal is and provide clear instructions for that, the better off you will be in avoiding these unnecessary, unscheduled moments of conflict. So just wanted to mention that to you. If you have little kids, kids who are in your home but are old enough to communicate with you, be on guard for this. It's true, women are more prone to this because men are linear thinkers. So we see, we're at point A, we know what point Z is, we give clear instructions to get there, but women do not communicate that way in some cases, in most cases, they don't do it. And so you just have to be aware that when it comes to instructions, especially with children, you have to provide clear A to Z instructions and then maybe a consequence if that isn't followed through. The moment you open the door for, well, why didn't this happen? Or hey, do you see everything that I'm going through? All day I've been doing this, and this. How could you not even do this simple thing? Well, you start to attribute moral motive to their lack of obedience, and no matter what they say, really, you've already made up your mind. Avoid question-based instructions, and you will avoid quite a few arguments that you are not prepared to have.